The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Hey there, everybody. This is another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. Dave, your host and author, and this is part 2 of our interview at Ulele in Tampa. If you have not listened to episode 204 of the Florida Beer Podcast, that would be part 1 of our interview, and I strongly recommend that you head on out there and check that out before jumping into here, because we are just going to start right off with the rest of our conversation with Ulele's Brewmaster Tim Shackton and Jeff Houck, the Vice President of Marketing for the 1905 family of restaurants, who obviously owns Ulele. It's been a relatively popular restaurant. It is one of the most popular tables in all of Tampa, and no matter when you're at the top of the Riverwalk, obviously it's got a massive crowd, and you'll see that when you go. And because of that, well, they're going to have to expand here pretty soon. So we're going to chat about the expansion plans, chat a little bit more about the creation and kind of what you can expect when you're going, and all sorts of other really great things from one of my absolute favorite restaurants and breweries in the state of Florida. So here we go. Without much further ado, part 2 of our interview at Ulele with Tim Shackton and Jeff Houck. Enjoy.
Another thing I'd like to add to the whole mix, it's good to be grounded in how you approach. I'm a very simple man. The core tenets of my brewing principles are literally like commandments, right? Thou shalt not use clarifying agents or finings in thy beer, period, right? We practice a lot of these old brewing principles to achieve one thing. And it's one thing that a lot of brewers take for granted: drinkability. When I say drinkability, I obsess about it. What do I mean? There's a million different ways you could make a beer. 90% of the time, if you're a skilled brewer, it'll taste good. But there's only a handful of times during that million crossing intersections of flavor expression that you get drinkability. And what is that? It's a je ne sais quoi. It makes you want to tilt the glass back, enjoy the flavor of the beer, but you couple that enjoyment with an intense desire to sate your thirst, right? Because that's how you think. That's how I think about beer. And the only real important thing to me as a brewer is the empty glass coming across the table. And if they get the second round, I call it double down. If I have double down on my beer, I know I'm doing well. If I don't have double down on any beer that I make, and there have been beers that I've made that have been like that, I'm not even remotely interested, because it's part of the dining process too. It's a culture. It's an environment. It spans the length of the table and the community, but more importantly, the individual families that come in here, right? It's a lot of it, beer has to do with hospitality. So I think a lot of those things when I'm brewing, the German method of krausening is very intensive. It requires multiple tanks of the same beer in a different stage of production simultaneously. I tell people it's almost like somebody at home with a sourdough starter. You always have to have that beer going. And why do they do it? Because the energy of a new fermentation rushing into a cold stored beer creates brilliant clarity. A champagne effect of small bubbles slowly rising to the top of the glass, a thick head that sticks, the Belgian lace, a beautiful bouquet of aromatic, easier, more stable product to go into packaging. You're taking the flavor of the beer like Spinal Tap from 9 to 11. And why do you do that? You take that step for one reason alone. I don't need 50 beers. I don't need 10 IPAs. Make one IPA, make it really good, and put it on the bar top fast because people don't have a lot of time. I respect their time. It's the same thing with a classic, flawlessly executed Reinheitsgebot Pure lager. When you have what we have with this beautiful real estate, the guests that come into our building or consume our beer deserve nothing less than the finest quality raw materials, the best process that has stood the test of time. And a lot of brewers would argue against that. Ale production takes 2 weeks. It's easy to make a lot of beer that way. But that's not how beer became great. Beer became great because it was hard to make. It's much harder to make beer than it is to distill spirits. It's much harder to make beer than it is to make wine. At the end of the day, I stand on that benchmark, and that benchmark has served us well. 70% of our beer is lager. We sell a lager 7 out of 10 times. And why? Well, it's almost directly commensurate with the world supply. 70% of the world supply of beer is lager. Why is that? It's crisp. It's easy to drink. Sometimes it drinks like liquid bread. That's why people loved it so much.
But it's difficult from a production aspect because it takes double the time of an ale, which means that if you're going to have a lot of beer, a lot of fluid coming out of the system, you have to have a lot of real estate. And then don't even get me started on barrel aging, because obviously that's got to have a place to sit and go. And you kind of mentioned this beautiful real estate, but definitely not cheap real estate. So is that something that was just a known factor? Like, look, we got to have the space. It's just, we're going to be sitting on this stuff for longer than normal, and we're just going to do it.
Well, one of the reasons why we're planning an expansion, we're relocating the brewery tanks from the river level to the street level, and we're going to have a big, beautiful facility. We'll be able to expand our capacity. That's one of the major reasons. We don't want to quit this real estate. This is where it was all born. All the big houses of beer in the history of our country have fallen. The ones that have fallen because they have laid victim to the same age-old adage, I want to grow, I want to grow, I want to grow. And all of a sudden, one guy in a wheelbarrow in Detroit pushing 2 kegs of beer across the street builds the 3rd largest brewery producer in the world. And then 3 generations later, it comes crashing down like a house of cards. We don't have those problems. We already have a historically strong company. So what do? We want to focus on the best quality product we can make. I don't have to brag about it. I put it in front of a guest. I say, this is the purest expression of a beer that we can make. It represents generations of knowledge and experience. And I hope that you enjoy it.
Awesome. And with those generations, one of the things that you've both mentioned a lot of is the anticipated clientele. It seems like you're really focusing on the Tampa native. Obviously there will be visitors that come and go and everything, but it really looks like you're looking for the people that live here, that work here, that play here, and so on. So what was it like creating a brand new concept, connecting it to the community, and was success assured? Was this sort of a, if you brew it, they will come sort of a thing?
No, I think that it's interesting to go back and look at, as Tim was saying, this was an industrial facility. They literally had to carve out the footer to make all the piping and all the leads and electricity and everything you needed to do to make it a restaurant. It was not intended to be that. And they thought it was going to be a $2 million project. And Richard thought it would be a $4 million project, and it wound up being closer between $6 and $8 million, that's a lot of glasses of beer to sell. And at one point, the CFO of the company went to Richard and said, "You're putting the company at risk." And he said, "I believe in it. I just believe in this concept. There's nothing like this in Tampa, and we'll be able to do this." So, it's a bigger risk than it would look when you look at the success. Ulele and Columbia are two of the top 3 most booked restaurants in Tampa on Open Table. Columbia has a capacity for 1,700 people. Ulele's a little smaller than that.
Just a bit.
So we're doing an immense amount of churn of lunch and dinner customers. We have people that are out on the lawn. We have a beer garden. We have all different kinds of little spots for people to tuck away. But that has to be a very efficient kitchen, but also has to be a brutally efficient brewing capacity to keep up with all of that demand. So nothing was assured here at all. This was, as I said, a blind spot for Tampa. There's really nothing here except for Stetson University has their campus about a block away. Everything else was either social services or governmental. And Richard had to prove that people would come here after dark. And he did. And that's, if you look at what Tampa Heights has become, a lot of it was established in 2014 by Richard, who created this little oasis with help from the city and the Corps of Engineers who redid the spring. The city refurbished right next door to the Riverwalk. Waterworks Park. And so it was definitely a conjoined effort, but he really put the company on the verge by doing it, and it has paid off handsomely. We get a lot of tourists. We obviously do because we're so close to downtown. By the way, downtown redrew its downtown district to include Ulele when it was so popular, so we could be part of downtown.
Okay.
I love telling that story because that is something that only happens when you're just an iconic success the way this is. There was nothing to predict other than the excellence of Columbia that we would be able to replicate it in a new form, much less go in a whole different, beverage service style. So it's an amazing testament. We do have a Ulele at Tampa International Airport. This is not like going and getting a slice of pizza. There's charbroiled oysters in the middle of the airport. It's become its own landmark for not only restaurants in Tampa, but the idea that Tampa can have something like this that's close to the water and reflective of what's local.
And I would also like to quickly add, leadership requires you to make certain decisions. Just like a commanding officer of a battalion out in the field, you look to the people below you with a measure of trust and certainty, and that's based on knowledge and experience. When Richard hired me, he knew that I had the experience to do the build. He knew that I had a family pedigree that lent credence to this project. But more importantly is that one moment when I looked at him and I said, "You're helping to build this brewery. You're financing it. This is your brewery. What do you want me to brew?" And he told me something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, "Follow your dream." That's what he said.
That is remarkable for a brewer to be.
Well, imagine the enormous risk involved. But in a way, when I heard him say those words, I knew what I had to do. And I had to base it on the foundation of where we've been before and how to celebrate that moving forward. And I took that charge so seriously. After the few hours after he told me that, it hit me like a ton of bricks, the enormity of the responsibility. I knew the moment I walked this property what it could become. I also knew, and I know now, that it's become 100 times bigger than I ever anticipated. And why is that? People walk into Ulele not necessarily as craft beer enthusiasts. They come to Ulele to dine. And that measure, that anchor on the wheel is absolutely the most powerful thing that we have. Because it gets the people who otherwise would not be predisposed to buy craft beer at any level to sit at the table and look at what we have and make a choice and be able to talk to people about the process and why is it so important. So, we always have craft beer enthusiasts, 30-40% or more of the people that come through the door I could talk to for a half hour about the dry hopping of a New England IPA, and they would understand me. But it's the people that come in and they give me the one thing that I can never repay them for, their time. And they sit at the table, they bring their family, like you brought your family today. How hard is it for people to get together? And they choose to come see me. They choose to come see us. That charge is very important to me, and I don't want to belittle it in any way by putting anything less substantial than the absolute best that I can do. And I think that's how and why we keep growing from the ground up. We don't have to have billboards. We don't have to have coupons or advertising. We have somebody like you that walks out of here and goes and says to your wife, I had the greatest calamari. We had the most wonderful time. And you tell 10 of your friends, ask for Tim. He'll show you around the brewery. He'll show you all the artwork. That's what it's all about. One by one, guest by guest. That's how we build the foundation.
And I would say at this point in the history of Ulele, you now have certain recipes that people are coming back for. Because
Yes.
Right now, it's even on the signage outside, is what I would say is probably the hallmark of the brewing year for you, which is your honeymoon lager.
The honeymoon lager, I knew we launched it the year after we were open. And I knew it would be a big hit because we landed it on the field at the Gasparilla Distance Classic. And after that moment where we were able to be out on a field giving free samples to thousands of runners, when we brought that product back, that there would be traction. And the greatest compliment that I could ever receive is the flattery of knowing that your neighbors are trying to make strawberry beer. And that happened early on. It still continues to happen. But what's the difference between our honeymoon lager and all the other varietals? We source fresh from Florida strawberries exclusively and only. And we only serve that beer while there is a harvest because it's beyond just the beer. I could carry it year round if we used Central Valley berries. I don't want berries from out of the area. I know the names of the growers. I've walked the fields with the producers, and we have had a relationship for a very long time now. Wish Farms in particular sponsors us every year. And the Wishnowsky family has been open since 1921. So you have a lot of historical companies coming together. And what are we celebrating? We're celebrating what we always talk about: family, community, continuity. And it's reflected in the berry that they pull out of the earth because it's the sexiest strawberry on the planet Earth. Now, I take a flat of strawberries. I cut and puree the berries. I make a pulp. I fold that pulp by rolling it into each individual half-barrel keg across the production floor. I tell everybody this because I tell them it's not extract, it's not oil, it doesn't contain glycol, because the last thing I want is to put food-grade antifreeze in people's bodies. That's why it's just a kiss of strawberry up front,
Yeah.
And it ends up biscuity and creamy at the end.
Was it exciting to you when you moved down here and you saw some of the agriculture that's in the area?
The thing is I don't originally hail from Milwaukee. My family does.
Gotcha.
My grandfather was one of the few people in my family who was not a brewer, but he was a soldier. And he had frostbite from the Battle of the Bulge, and he couldn't stand Milwaukee, so he moved down here. I grew up with all my Milwaukee brewer relatives coming in from up north for the winter. So I got a chance to learn about the process from them. It wasn't only until I got home from Desert Storm and I was a Marine and I had spent all my sea money that I got an opportunity as a brewer. And fortunately, the person I apprenticed under knew of my family, and I spent 5 years apprenticing under them. So it takes a long time to train a gifted brewer. I'm not saying that I am, but I learned a lot. Now, what do I love about Fresh from Florida? I love looking down the horizon of what could be. What if we were able to grow hops in the state of Florida that are beer viable? We already are. What if we are able to source our own grain? We could build malt houses. We could have hop farmers. We could not have to compete with all the other states or other regions for the product because it will be sourced indigenously. That's a big driving factor.
Yeah, and it seems like from a company aspect, you don't have to do these things, but you have to.
It's part of like the longevity in the mission, the core of who we are. Well, because I want when I see what I'm doing here and I see the look on a guest's face, that's all that matters. I know I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm going in the right direction. There will come a time when Fresh from Florida lays the foundation to give birth to many more hundreds of breweries across the landscape of the state of Florida. I have no doubt. But somebody has to start. Again, back to leadership. You have to take that first step. They blow the whistle. You put your hat on. You fix bayonets and go over the top. You have to take a step forward. It's always a risk, but that's part of the foundation of who we are, is to look at somebody, whether they're growing strawberries in a field or they're growing red wheat in a field. You adopt that risk with them, because just like the communities in Bavaria, where the families all married in together, one common purpose, make the best quality product. Your very lives depend on it. And that's what I think needs to be rediscovered in the culture.
That's awesome. And that leadership, I think, expands to a number of other locations. You seem to really be doubling down on Tampa. And you had mentioned previously that you are going to be expanding Ulele. So I guess my initial question is, what is the purpose of the expansion? Because the one thing that I've always wanted to see is, obviously, you have a phenomenal brewer who, you understand the history of the region. You understand the recipes and the history that are part of the company that you are with. And you've got a decades, actually over century old company that started with beer. Is it finally going to be time for Columbia to make the beer that started Columbia?
The reason for the expansion, there's many reasons. First of all, to make the brewery more prominent. There's a lot of people who come here and have no idea that the brewery is right behind the kitchen. It's just the nature of the building itself and where we were able to put it. People don't know this, but the room where the brewery is now located was atop a footer of concrete that had never been surveyed. And when they started to survey it, they realized there was a series of cisterns and piping that had to be dug out in order to put it where it is right now. Some of the equipment you can see in the garden, by the way, as sort of almost like industrial sculpture. But anyway, we don't have private dining here, so the plan is to build private dining. There is a plan to put rooftop sustainable garden with an experience, a culinary experience up there. We need to. This kitchen was never built to handle the numbers that we have. We've already replaced our circular barbacoa grill once because of the demand on it. The kitchen needs to be expanded back into where the brewery is now. So we're going to move the brewery more prominent, expand the kitchen, expand the space for storage, and also expand, above where the brewery is now for some private dining. So it accomplishes a bunch of tasks, but basically the restaurant was never built to be this successful. We hoped, but now we're finally going to catch up to what the demand is and provide that space to do even more than what we do now, but to continue to do it in a way. To address something you said earlier about Tim feels a compulsion to do this. Again, I'm Tim's hype man. I learned the word Reheitsgebot from Tim.
You mean Ron Howard's boat? Because it's
Yes,
big.
Ron
It's
Howard's
right out
boat.
there in the river.
Right.
I see it.
I learned about German purity laws from Tim. There is nobody in the area who insists that Tim uses 500-year-old German purity laws, or who celebrated the anniversary of the 500th anniversary of those
April
German
23rd
Yes.
of 2016.
Yes,
Just don't celebrate it with the strawberry.
we
beer.
did. Oh,
Well, that's not, yeah, but the strawberries are not Reinheitsgebot.
but my point is that
Most of my beers are.
Tim's standards are the family standards, and the family has, given a choice between quality and cost, they will pick quality every time. You know, there's things that you can adjust in other ways to kind of compensate for fluctuations in cost of goods. And goodness knows, in the past 10 years, we've had immense volatility in every ingredient that you can point at, and continues to be the case. But, you know, they could have bought cheaper brewing equipment, but they bought domestic. That was a part of their ethic. One of the reasons that we had pork after COVID was because everybody else sourced from Asia and we sourced from the United States. And our pork provider called and said, "You will not be out of pork." So it's that kind of ethic. And then Tim matches that demand for quality and purity and the best expression of the beers that he can make.
That is kind of amazing. So it seems like not only did the gamble pay off, but the dividends keep growing to levels that I don't think either of you really had anticipated.
Richard would tell you that we're only as good as our last meal, and we're only as good as our last glass of beer. And at any point you disappoint, you start to damage your business. And it's absolutely crucial that everything that goes out of the kitchen or out of the brewery or has some sort of hospitality aspect to it be the premium example of what our standard of excellence should be. Even at 121 years, Colombia is still vulnerable, as all restaurants are. We heard today about the Chataway burger joint in St. Petersburg going away after decades and decades and decades. We've lost Munch's. We've lost all kinds of big, huge, important restaurants in the Tampa Bay area for a variety of reasons, but restauranting is hard. And anytime you decide that you're going to scrimp and save, you put yourself at risk. So we save where we can on the things that we can, but we do the absolute best we can to source the best quality, source domestically, family owned. One of the reasons we're dealing with Wish Farms in such a great collaboration is they're fourth generation family owned in Plant City. They started in a push cart in New York City. You know, I mean, it's that kind of great, rich family story. So we work with family owned whenever possible. You know, Tim sources his honey within 45 miles of here in Mayaca. I mean, it's just, there are easier ways to do things, and then there's the right way to do things. So I'm immensely proud to work with Tim, and I'm immensely proud to be proud of the Ulele brand and everything. Tim is our longest serving employee at Ulele. He is in the 1905 Family Hall of Fame. Last time we had a dinner 2 years ago, he was inducted, and rightly so, because he's had an indelible effect on the company.
And do you feel like 1905 is the right company that you needed to be at and are happy to build a part of what the future is going to be?
When I say this with as much seriousness as I can. I think that divine providence brought me here. I think that there was a little bit of prayer involved, a lot of Irish luck and German luck kind of landed me here. But I also believe that the best is yet to come. And has it exceeded my wildest dreams? Absolutely. It's even more than I expected, but it's not exactly how I foresaw it. All I know is that something amazing is going to happen to Tampa. Tampa has big city swagger. I'm looking at people up and down the Riverwalk, and I just say, I feel like I could be in Chicago. I feel like I could be in Montreal. I feel like I could be, this is the place to be. And I love being a part of it. I love knowing the names of the guests that come in here. knowing that in just a few years from now, there's going to be many more thousands of people emerging on their balconies of their condos and listening to the bell be rung at the top of our new construction to announce for happy hour to come in and enjoy a beer. And I'll be there like Quasimodo if I can. I'll be ringing that bell every day until I can't do it anymore. But I love where I've come. It really is grounded on the fact of a core philosophy that I believe in. And I think, yes, the company reflects that. I don't want to go anywhere else. You know, I belong here.
That's awesome. It's the right menu and the right beer and the right brewer and the right building and the right location in the right city. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Very happy to finally get you on the show. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, sir.
It's our pleasure.
So there we are with our 2 episodes at Ulele in Tampa. It's been a long time coming. They've been a particular favorite of mine, good friends of the blog. I've always been excited about the possibility of getting them on the podcast, and here we go, which is amazing. Thank you so much to Jeff and Tim and the phenomenal staff at Ulele and the phenomenal team at 1905 Family of Restaurants. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to Columbia, the original, the one in Ybor, pretty soon. But if not, obviously we spoke about this in the last episode. There's plenty more Columbias around, but Ulele is just sort of one of a kind. Unless you're in Airside Sea at Tampa International Airport, at which time they have a small one there too. Next episode, we are heading to St. Petersburg, one of my old favorite stomping grounds. Got a couple episodes there. One is a particular favorite of ours, and the other one is a brand new brewery that's actually in the facility that housed another brewery that has just vacated. You probably know who these people are, but if not, definitely follow us on social media. You'll find out when those episodes release. The best thing to do is Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or YouTube, because we publish a lot of stuff on all of those. Just search for Florida Beer Blog. You'll find us. I guarantee it. You can email us at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. We are also on pretty much every podcasting app you can think of. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on iHeart. You can ask your smart speaker to play the latest episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, and that will come out, which is awesome. But if you follow us on social media or you subscribe to us on a podcasting app, that's the best place to go, because that way you'll get the most up-to-date information that you can. If you do subscribe to us on a podcasting app, do us a huge favor. Go ahead and like us and subscribe, and make sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps us move up in the ratings, and that helps us get the word out to more and more Florida craft beer drinker and interested people. Yay. If you are interested in creating a podcast just like this one, Flintstone Media are the people to do it. Jemmy and her team are absolutely fantastic about taking your ideas and forming them into audio wonderment. So if you want, make sure to check out Flintstone Media at flintstonemedia.com. They're going to help you out. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Deal producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah of Flintstone Media is Jemmy Legagneur. This is David Butler, your host and author. We will see you in St. Pete next week. Thank you so much for listening, and drink Florida Craft.